I was born in 1938, actually, at Crown Street Women's Hospital. You heard of that?
No, where's that?
Crown Street, God. I'm trying to, the hospital's not there anymore.
So which city though?
But it was a lot of people, oh, in Sydney. Yeah, but that was, a lot of people were born at that hospital, did you know that?
Yeah.
1938.
And so where do you fit in your family?
I'm number 3 of 7 children. So it's interesting because you find there were like 5 boys and 2 girls. Parents was David Love, who was born on the ship, supposedly coming from Clackmannan near Glasgow, but he was on the ship coming out. He was the youngest of 5 children.
Yeah.
Yes, but anyway, my mother, her mother was Ruby Brown, but she came from Burke. Her maiden name was Nugent.
Oh.
Nugent, yes. She was a very nice, lady, you know.
Yeah. So then, can you tell us about Catherine Grayson? How did you meet her?
Well, as a teenager, I used to write to her, you know. I kind of liked her somehow in the movies, and when she came out to Sydney, I think it was in 1964, I went down to Checkers nightclubs where she was rehearsing. I was introduced to her and she knew who I was straight away, and she sat for about half an hour and kept the journal talking to me, you know, and then we became firm friends thereafter, you know. And when I went to America, I stayed at her place for about a year, you know.
Yeah. And so then to stay in the country, then you married her friend. Was that the deal?
Yeah, there was a friend of hers.
Yeah. So what was her name?
Her name was Anne Myers.
Yeah.
Anne Myers. She was a writer. She wrote film scripts and mainly television scripts.
Yeah, right.
She wrote.
And so, but she died, didn't she? Was that?
Yeah, she, when I was in Australia, came back to do work on a theatre in Grafton, and she came out. She was living with Mario Lanz's daughter and her boyfriend, and they had a big fight. And she went out of the house in a hurry, and he got knocked down by a truck. Now, she was in hospital, and then several weeks after she got out of hospital, she dropped dead on the street and was killed by a clot went to the brain, and she just was taken out like that.
How old was she?
She was older than me.
Yeah.
So I'd have to quite work it out.
And so who did you meet when you were staying with Catherine then? What famous people did you get to meet?
A lot of different ones that used to come to the house. Zsa Gabor was one that particularly came there. Another lady that you probably wouldn't know was Virginia O'Brien. She sang comedy songs in movies. You know, a lot of comedy stuff. And I'm just trying to think what others I've met Lucille Ball's son. When I was there, I used to go to the gym when I lived at Catherine's, and I'm just trying to think. Dean Martin's son, Dino, and Lucille Ball's son were great friends, and they used to go to the gym every week. And the 2 boys, you know.
Yeah.
But poor old, I'm just trying to think, Dino's son died, and I think he was really did affect Dean Martin particularly, you know what I mean. He was a very nice boy, I think. They both were nice lads, you know.
So what was your involvement in the Opera House?
I was in charge of advertising and planned. I had 2 years leading up to the opening, and I was in charge of advertising. And it was a case of I had to plan things like brochures that had to come out every month. There were posters. The advertising, which I've got in there, like putting together the souvenir program of the opening of the Opera House. The thing was that basically, thinking of those times, we had to, all the signage in the Opera House, like all of the, on toilet doors and stuff like that, I did.
Yeah.
That's great, isn't it?
Well,
But somebody had to do it. That was a question of that.
Yeah.
But it was interesting all that time. The network of all the different like under the Opera House, all of the dressing rooms and all of that stuff that was there for rehearsals, and that's a lot of rehearsal space. Very interesting, all of that part.
So when did you work for JC Williamson? Was that before or after that?
That was before.
So what was your job with how did you start with them?
I started there. I got a job working with a man called Peter Morrison, who was the publicity director, and I became his assistant. And then when he left, I took over his job, publicity person.
Yeah.
That was probably the best time of my life. I think I really enjoyed that. So I had 10 years at Greater Union Theatres working in their film division, and that was good too. But I went to work then in JC Williamson's and then at the Opera House. But I think it was, how do I put it? Always the interesting part, because that was like connection to Joan Sutherland and Pavarotti when they came around for the first opera season of the Sutherland Williamson Opera Company, and it was Richard Bonning, and there were some great stories to tell about that period and that, so.
So when in JC Williamson, when you pre-technology, what was the deal when you had to go around with your tickets to all of the main sort of shopping centres or whatever? What was that arrangement that you had? Like, how did you do that?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Because mainly, like, I worked in opposite the the earlier part of the situation. We were in a place called Mina House, which is in Macquarie Street, and it's interesting because we worked there for a while in the planning, and then we moved into the Opera House as we got ready, when those offices were made ready, and there, it's curious.
Because I remember you telling me something around that often that was your job, that you, when the tickets for shows came out, you dropped them off?
That would be at JCW. They were like...
What was that?
There were booking offices at David Jones, and Nicholson's was a music store, and Parlings, and then we had we would take the tickets down, and each day at 4 o'clock we'd collect the tickets back with the sales, and then, it was an interesting period, because there was a man that wrote the show, Sentimental Bloke, used to be at Nicholson's, like he was worked there. And he used to conduct a lot of shows for the amateurs around things in the suburbs, but he wrote this musical of the Sentimental Bloke, but he was married to an English lady who was a singer, Nancy Brown, her name was. And you can find her, rather interesting people they were. There are lots of characters in the show business. Because in the days of Williamson's, they ran the Tivoli and Her Majesty's Theatre. The Tivoli was in Castlereagh Street, Her Majesty's was down in Quay Street. But then they had the town hall concerts was very, very interesting, and of course it was very interesting because that's where you met a lot of the characters and that came in.
Yeah.
You know, so many people, probably people that necessarily, I would say that necessarily you probably didn't know because of the fact that they were people of their time.
Yeah.
You know, there was people around, because I used to work out of an office in the theatre hall, which you used to get in over the restaurant next door. You go in and up the left and then walk to the very back of it. You'd walk over like a bridge type of thing, and you'd go into the section where the offices were. It's interesting because it was all very, very exciting those days. You know.
So which shows did you do publicity for in terms of the big shows with JC Williamson?
Well, Hello Dolly was one, I remember vividly.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of Fiddler on the Roof was another great one at that time, and that's rather silly because I should have that. I've had that biography out, which means that you know you can. It pinpoints everything I did in that time and who I worked with. Like that was the time that Sir John Gielgud came out during that period, and I remember once having lunch with Sir John Gielgud and his great friend, a man called B.K. Beaumont, who was the head of one of the big theatre chains. I think the lady bought the chain of theatres in Britain that he had, you know. But it's interesting because he had just put on a revival of On the Town and couldn't work out why it wasn't working. And I had the cheek to try and tell him that I thought it was because of the film had come out with Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra. And I said that the show had a lot of interpolated music in the film, and of course people would have gone there would have been a bit disappointed that the film itself had all these extra songs, and I think in the revival you would have gone back to the old stuff where it would have seemed rather dull by comparison.
Yeah. So what happened, where did you meet Mike Walsh?
Well, I met Mike Walsh in the early days. He worked as one of the announcers. 2SM in those days was very, very popular because it was they had all these young disc jockey kind of empress people, and Mike Walsh was there, and I met him then, and that's the interesting thing because at Williamson's I got to go over to New Zealand with shows and I did a lot of work with the Edgley family on the Russian shows and all that stuff. Interesting going to New Zealand and doing the publicity for shows like that were going on there.